Chapter 24. Something had settled in Durotan's soul. Whatever the outcome of this pilgrimage, for such he realized it was, he was content. He had become chieftain during the worst time in this world's history, and had tried to lead as best he could. Now he, together with 2 shaman, one the eldest of the clan and one its lawkeeper, would be going where, if legend was to be believed, only one other orc had ever been. And that orc, too, had been a Frostwolf chieftain. It felt so right, so appropriate, that he found he could lay aside, at least for the moment, that which had gnawed at him since his father's death. The question of what would happen if he failed. It was an odd sensation, given their sinister surroundings. Delgar had not exaggerated. The earth itself, not anything on it, was on fire. Devoid of trees and grasses, the ground emitted wisps of smoke that slithered close to the earth like fog. Here and there, Durotan glimpsed glowing patches and the occasional small flame. Breathing was possible, but difficult. There was no sign of snow or ice to offer water or douse the deeply embedded, sullenly smoking fire. His mind wrestled with the idea. How could earth burn? It did not matter. How could a mountain emit liquid fire, or the ground open up beneath them? How could any of these things happen? Drek'tar had given him the answer. The spirits were sick. As they rode, taking care to avoid the smouldering spots, Durotan glanced from time to time at Gaia and Drek'tar. They too seemed calm, with a strangely youthful eagerness about them. Gaia had suggested that Palkar be left behind. She would guide the elderly shaman, she said. It would be less risk, and if for some reason they did not return, Palkar knew most of what both of them did, and would be able to carry on the lawkeeper tradition. "What are we looking for?" Durotan had asked Drek'tar as they had embarked on the journey. "We will know," Drek'tar said, somewhat distantly. It was a frustrating answer, but considering the source, the spirits themselves, Durotan reasoned that it was likely the best answer the shaman could provide. He tried another tactic, asking his mother about the story of the Frostwolf chieftain and the stone seat that was in the scrolls. "While legends are often based on true events," she told him, "the language used to record them is—" She cocked her head, searching for the word. "Flowery," Zarka grunted. Durotan laughed, and even Gaia had to smile. "I would say either embellished or too sparse," she said. "Too sparse in this case. It is said, he went as north could be, up to the very edge of the world, and found there the seat of the spirits. And there he entered, and there he sat for 3 days and 3 nights, until the spirits came unto him." "I had forgotten it was that long," Durotan said. "I told Orgrim we'd be back sooner." Drek'tar grunted. "Their situation is dire, so I think it is safe to say the spirits will come to us sooner rather than later. Their needs and ours are urgent." They pressed on, and the sun made its way across the sky. This far north, night would last only a few hours. Durotan wondered if his eyes were dazzled when he began seeing a line of white along the horizon. But then Kulzak said, "Chieftain, I believe that is snow up ahead." Durotan licked his parched lips. He had been conservative in his consumption of water, not knowing if there would be a fresh source, indeed any source, awaiting them. To see snow and ice was a relief. Drek'tar tensed atop Wisear's back. "There," he said, and it gave Durotan a chill to see that the blind shaman was pointing directly at the white line. "They will be there. Beyond the snow and the ice is the edge of the world." No one moved. They sat astride their devoted wolf mounts, faces turned as north could be, somehow knowing that if they took one more step, everything would change. Durotan took a deep breath. "Let us not keep the spirits waiting," he said, and urged Sharptooth forward. Soon the wolves' paws fell on snow instead of burning earth. The group drank from their water skins freely, and filled them with clean snow to melt when they stopped to eat from their rations. Delgar had lashed some fuel to the back of his wolf, and fire was quickly lit. They melted the snow and drank it warm, and the heat in his belly heartened Durotan. They ate quickly and poured the rest of the heated liquid into their waterskins. No one wanted to linger, not with the destination so close. The white snow that marked the horizon began to develop a blue tinge in the center. Durotan heard a strange noise, almost like rhythmic breathing. The wind picked up, and he shivered, drawing his cloak more tightly around his frame as the chill threatened to knife through him. He sniffed the air. "Salt," Gul'dan said.
"We are close,"
Drek'tar said, his voice trembling with excitement. The wolves pricked up their ears, their black, moist noses working at the strange scents, but moved forward at their master's urging. The snow seemed to change consistency beneath their feet. Durotan looked down, confused. The earth mixed in with the snow was not brown, but pale. He dropped lightly down to pick some up, sifting it through his hand. It felt rough, like ground nuts. He looked up. The others were staring silent out at the horizon. At first he couldn't understand what they were looking at. He saw white snow, white earth, and blue water. Blue water that stretched as far as the eye could see in every direction save the south behind them. It moved, creating the soft, breathing sound they had heard, and now he recognized it. He had heard the gentler counterpart of this sound, the lapping of lake water. This vast expanse of water had to be the ocean. Huge, flat chunks of white ice floated atop it, and beyond these, a mountain of white jutted from the sea. The sun was on its downward arc, but still would not set for some time. Light struck the ice mountain at such an angle it reflected off it with searing brightness, and Durotan found he could not look at it directly. Even an indirect gaze caused spots to dance before his eyes. He knew at once what it was. No one said anything. Drek'tar startled them all when he slipped off Wise Ear and, to Durotan's shock, raced heedlessly down to within an arm's length of the highest reach of the water. He lifted a hand and, blind though he was, pointed straight at the ice mountain.
"There,"
he said.
"They await us there. They are in danger. We must hurry."
Durotan spoke very gently.
"Drek'tar, what lies between us and them is a vast stretch of water. It is too cold for us to swim, and we have no boats. How do we get there?"
Drek'tar's face grew grey as he listened. His body sagged, and he dropped to his knees, his head in his hands.
"Please,"
he begged.
"Please, Spirit of Water, help us so that we may help you."
The only answer was the implacable, rhythmic sound of the water lapping on the shore. This can't be, thought Durotan. We've come so far, endured so much. He clenched his fists in fury and turned to Gaia, who looked at him helplessly. Zaka, Delgar, and Gul'dan stayed silent. Durotan threw his head back and roared. The sound carried in the clear air, a cry of pure grief and anger and hopelessness, and when his lungs were empty, he inhaled a great gulp of the frigid air and bellowed. "Spirits, hear me! Fire, you destroyed our village. Earth and water, you swallowed our people. We have marched across dead ground that burns and taste air that we can hardly breathe. We see life dwindling all around us as our own numbers dwindle. And even so, even with all that you have done to us, you asked us for our aid and we have come. Where are you then? Where are you?" The last words echoed and then died, until only the sound of the wind remained. Durotan slumped against Sharptooth's side. Gaia went to him and gently touched his shoulder.
"My son,"
she said, her voice trembling.
"Behold."
Durotan lifted his face from the warm, rough comfort of the wolf's fur and gazed with dull eyes. "I see what I have seen before," he said flatly. "The blue water, too cold and deep. The ice mountain, out of our reach. The chunks of—" His eyes widened. He stepped away from Sharptooth, staring at the water. The great flat pieces of ice were moving. Not simply rocking in the water, but moving purposefully toward the shore, as if they were rafts of logs being steered by an unseen hand. The hairs at the back of his neck prickled as he realized that was exactly what they were. The spirits had sent them away to cross. Gaia smiled up at her son, looping her arm through his as she guided him, almost in a daze, to the shoreline. Zarka was describing the scene to Drek'tar, who beamed and stood up straight and tall, lifting his staff in a salute to the spirits, who had not deserted them after all. Durotan stared at the natural raft. It bumped up against the shore with each gentle wave, awaiting them. The orcs looked at one another, humbled. Durotan, their chieftain, stepped forward first. He called Sharptooth to him, but the wolf would not come. It looked anxiously at the ice floe, ears unhappily flat, whimpering. Durotan made a decision. "I dislike leaving you here, but I would dislike it even more if you panicked and we all fell into the water," he said. The other wolves, too, looked more than willing to be left behind. Besides, this might give them a chance to hunt something to eat. They would not travel out of earshot, and would come quickly enough when the orcs returned. Durotan gave his friend a pat, and turned to step onto the ice floe. It bobbed dangerously, and he froze, letting it settle. He reached out a hand to Gaia. Zarka and Kulzak each took one of Drek'tar's arms, guiding him carefully. Delgar was the last to step onto the ice. There were no poles with which to steer the raft, nor were any poles likely to reach the bottom of this water. But Durotan did not worry. He let his shoulders relax and his heart open as the ice floe now moved against the direction of the waves, borne swiftly on the dark blue toward the glittering, towering mountain that housed the seat of the spirits. Durotan found himself having to crane his neck as the blue-white peaks rose in his field of vision. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. Even Great Father Mountain, when snow wrapped him in its white blanket, had not looked like this. Durotan wondered if this were truly a mountain at all, or if this entire sacred site were completely carved out of ice. Their raft slowly came to a halt, and the frost wolves jumped off onto the snow with great care, lest they capsize their transport. In this environment, to become wet was to become dead. Up ahead, an entrance into the heart of the ice beckoned. Piles of snow, each half as high as an orc, seemed to mark a trail leading up to it. Durotan did not expect to be able to glimpse inside. A cave ought to be dark, after all. But he found to his surprise that this one was not. A soft gasp of pure awe and reverence escaped him. The seat of the spirits was painted in every shade of blue his mind could imagine, and some he had never dreamed of. He saw the faint glow of other colors and wondered what magic had illuminated it. It pulled at something deep in his bones and his soul. He realized he had been wrong when he had thought the Frostwolf ancestral home destroyed when the Fire River washed so cruelly over Frostfire Ridge. This was their true home. Durotan dragged his gaze from the beautiful, luminous opening and turned to Drek'tar, gently placing his hand under the older orc's arm to guide him. Drek'tar smiled sightlessly at him and began to speak. Then he froze as if he had been turned to stone, his mouth still hanging open. "Drek'tar," Durotan asked anxiously, "what is wrong?"
Something is not right,"
he groaned, and pressed the heels of his hands to his temples, grimacing. "Are they in danger?" Durotan asked. He glanced at Gaia, who shrugged helplessly. The others all drew their weapons, but looked about uncertainly. There was no sound of an enemy, no telltale scent. All was white and cold and still and clean.
No,
moaned Drek'tar.
"They say we are."
There was a flurry of motion. Something erupted from the snow hummocks Durotan had thought were markers, their pristine whiteness now a vile riot of colors. The grey-black of animal fur cloaks, the blinding yellow-white glint of the sun striking metal, the revolting hue of dark, dried blood covering screaming faces as the Red Walkers, who, Durotan realized with sick horror, had been expecting them, attacked.